The era of climate change denial. What is this thing? What is this time period? How long does it last? And I guess why? Climate change denial is an old phenomenon, as old as pointing out that it's real, naturally. The instinctive and immediate response to bad news is to shoot the messenger multiple times. Back in around 2003, I was completing a degree in environmental science, and a big part of talk in the course at the time was, why is there being presented in most public media the perception that there is, 50-50? Half for, half against. Yes, it's real. Maybe humans caused it, maybe they didn't. And at the time, no, it is not real at all. Somebody has got their thermometer turned sideways and isn't reading things right. So this question has plagued us now for some years. It's now the year 2017 and 14 years later, and it seems very little has changed. Very little is new on this subject, except for the fact, of course, that climate change is happening. Some may remember a protocol called Kyoto, which it doesn't really matter when, but some years ago there was a pledge to lower emissions a little bit, and it was not adhered to. The countries made a pledge, and then they didn't go through with what they said they would do. So we have to ask a question as thinking human beings and avoid just becoming depressed on this subject, and ask how long and what is needed to end the era of climate change denial. What situation will bring it about? What is the condition which will end the fairly psychotic reaction of, it isn't humans' fault. It's not our fault. We didn't do it. If it's real, it's not our fault. If it's not real, obviously, it's some scientist or other's delusion, and they're putting it on us unfairly. But generally now, things are focusing on the first one, which is, it's there, but we didn't do it, and we can't really do anything about it. So how do we end that perception, that place in time, whereby climate change isn't a real thing? Because that's what they're saying. It's been easily demonstrated the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased massively ever since the burning of what people like to call fossil fuels began. That's starting with coal and moving rapidly on to the more liquid types of fuel, that there's been a massive increase in carbon in the atmosphere. And of course there are other things such as methane from deposits in permafrost, and so on and so on. The albedo, which is the reflection rate in the glaciers and ice caps, lessening, and then the water warming quicker, and so on and so on and so on. But the main one is the carbon dioxide, and it's been demonstrated very clearly. Nobody needs to argue about these things. You can argue that the sky isn't blue, but only if you have never seen the sky. So what is needed to end this psychotic denial? I personally don't know. I personally am not aware of what would be required, what situation, what circumstance, what combination of factors would end the insistence that this is just not happening. That there is just, it's not being done by humans. And of course we know, those of us that have been watching it for any time at all, that there's plenty of good reasons, logical reasons, if limited in scope, to say it's not done by humans, because if it were being done by humans, perhaps we'd need to take the responsibility for harming the lives of our children, for not doing anything about a problem which just keeps getting bigger and will have more and more ramifications as time goes by. The climate, after all, changes in stages, and these stages are sort of a slow-motion tornado. They do not immediately, in the space of 2 months or even 2 years in general, have an immediate, okay, the climate has changed. So the consequences are drawn out and painful, like pulling a Band-Aid off very, very, very slowly. And the way in which we produce it is also something which we are only contributing to in stages. So again, I come back to this. What is needed to make this disastrous situation, and because those of you that have studied it know that it's disastrous, and if you haven't, it's disastrous. What is needed to make the disastrous situation of ignoring that climate change is real and caused by human beings come to an end? This, after all, has been a mantra of many political parties, particularly the group that calls itself the right and conservatives, which actually, based on the word conservative and conservation, belongs squarely in the let's not screw up the atmosphere group. But that word has been hijacked by people who believe in low taxes, apparently at least, and some very, very simplistic explanations of very, very serious things. So we've got a group, particularly the so-called right wing. I do not think they are actually right-wingers. I won't count myself as a cliche right-winger, but I don't think they actually qualify as a right-wing individual who believes in preservation and family values and looking out for their children, because they're not looking out for their children, and they're the main group that says it's not real. I was watching a group of political candidates recently in the country of Canada, and these candidates were all having an argument about who was going to be leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And the Conservative Party of Canada had basically one individual. There may have been one or two others out of well over 10. Don't worry about the specific number because honestly they're fairly interchangeable. Candidates who only one of them said that climate change was caused by human beings. They had a very flaky response. There's a silly tax that's being put on it. No attempt to really come to terms with this as a reality. Very depressing stuff, by the way, to those which are scientifically inclined. This is very disturbing material. This is the sort of stuff that gets you very unnerved by society. But before I tangent off, what is needed to get the segment of the population, which is obviously huge? The Conservatives are either the number one or number two party in Canada, and so goes for most of the world, this sort of attitude. And this political party doesn't have any appetite. There's no appetite whatsoever to accept climate change as a reality. What is it about them? What is it about their outlook on life where they simply cannot come to terms with the fact that climate change is real? What is it about them? I don't know. Maybe you do. Thanks for listening.